Okay guys, so let's finish up the drum machine designer tutorials with this final bit. We've looked at everything to do with making custom voices, and we've looked at everything to do with making custom kits in terms of having a collection of different sounds on the pads for the kit, whether they're factory sounds or custom sample based sounds we've created or synthesized sounds we've created, right? So we've looked at everything to do with that in terms of creating custom kits, but there's one thing we haven't looked at, and that is the stack. Every custom kit you create has a stack, of course, in the mixer. And we can customize the stack as well, so that when our custom kit loads, those customizations that we've made to the channels in the stack, they load up with the kit as part of that customization of our custom kit. All right? Now, I'm not talking about the individual outputs for the actual drums. Okay, we've looked at everything to do with tweaking those channels when we looked at custom voices. What I'm talking about is the extra channels. We've got 6 submixes for every kit we build. Okay, these 6 submix channels for the kick, snare and claps, hi-hats, toms, shakers and percussion, cymbals and effects. Those 6 submixes can be customized. And then we've got our auxiliary return effects inside the stack. These can be customized. And then everything in the kit goes to the final stereo channel. The whole kit arrives here in stereo. Yeah. And this final stereo channel has effects on. They can be changed for any effects that we want to further customize our kit. Okay, so we're looking at those customizations. And anything you do to these channels, these extra channels, when you save your kit, all those extra things get loaded with the custom kit as well as the sounds. Okay. So the first thing is the 6 submixes. Okay. Every one of them has a compressor and an EQ on by default, but they're not actually being used. They're not active, but they're on the channels. So for example, on the kick submix here, there's the compressor, but the threshold is up too high so for it to be doing anything. So any of the 6 submixes, you can have compression and EQ on those. So I could compress my kick a little bit, a bit of gentle compression on the kick submix, and then EQ it as well a little bit. Let's just do a quick thing, scoop out the mids a bit like that. Okay, so I've got some EQ and compression on the kick submix, and then on the snare and clap submix again I could compress it a little bit, just a little bit of soft compression. And some EQ, just give it a little bit of an EQ tweak. Yeah, and the hi-hats now. On the hi-hats, so you can add, because on these submixes you can add any additional plugins that you want, or take off any plugins that you don't need. Okay, so I've got some compression EQ on the kick submix now. I've got some compression and EQ on the snare and clap submix. On the hat submix, I don't want compression. I'll take the compressor off. I'll bring the EQ up, and I'm going to have a new plugin. I'm going to have flanging on my hi-hat submix, so got a flanger on there, and have some flanging like that, and then I'll EQ the hi-hats submix as well. Just cut the bottom end out like that, and boost it up around 6K with a narrow band there to give it a little, so it's very thin and whatever I like, you know. Right, so there's the hats. They've got some effects on now, customized, a flanger and an EQ, and then the toms, the percussion, and the cymbals and shakers. Let's say I think, well, I don't want compression or EQ on these submixes, so rather than waste resources, I'll just take these plugins off. So those 3 submixes don't have EQ or compression on, so it's not wasting resources, right? So I've done a bit of customization there, and when I save my kit, this all gets saved with the kit, right? Now the next thing is you've got the delay and the reverb auxiliary return. Okay, each of the 6 submixes, if you remember, the first auxiliary sends out to the internal delay, so you can add delay to any of your 6 submixes, and the second auxiliary send on each of the 6 submixes sends out to the internal reverb, so you can add reverb to any of your 6 submixes. Okay, well, the next thing you can do obviously is you can tweak the delay and the reverb to whatever delay preset and reverb preset that you want. So at the moment, if I turn up the first auxiliary on the snare, this is the delay I've got. So I could change that. I'll open the delay and change it to a different delay. I'll go with a shorter delay, a 16th note. Just tweak this a bit, less feedback, like that. So I've got a short little slapback delay now. I'll take the beat sync off actually and make it shorter still. Let's make it about. Right, that's got this little short slapback for my delay now, and then I can EQ that as well. Change the EQ to further customize my delay return. Let's drop that back a bit so we're not cutting the bottom end so much, and cut the top end more, and then just boost it down here in the low mids a bit like that. So I've tweaked my delay return. There's a further customization, and then the reverb here, I could tweak that to a reverb that I want. At the moment it's got this 3.6 second percussion plate, but I could change that to something different. I could go with a smaller plate like this 1.8 second drum plate. Right, and then just turn some of that up on the snare. And again I could EQ that, so I'm EQing my reverb return a bit differently. Let's have less bottom end cut but more top end cut, and again I'm going to make this a warm deep mid, sort of wooden, more sort of hollowy type reverb. Yeah, so I've tweaked the delay and I've tweaked the reverb to get a custom reverb and a custom delay that I want, and EQ'd them. And again, I saved my kit. The new delay I've set up and the new reverb sound I've set up, that gets saved with the custom kit, right? But you know, these two don't have to be a delay and a reverb. They can be whatever you like. I mean, I could have two reverbs for the two auxiliaries on my 6 submixes instead of a delay and a reverb. So this delay here, I could change the delay plug into a reverb. So another reverb. Okay, and let's make this a small reverb, like a small, like say this 0.8 of a second or 0.6 per second drum booth here, like that. I mean, there's just so many to choose from. So let's turn up that first auxiliary on the snare, and now this is sending to a reverb, not a delay. So I'll change this so it says reverb 1. Okay, so here we've got a small little ambient reverb now, like that. Right, and then the second reverb I can make it a bigger one. Let's make it a bit of a bigger one. We'll have let's have this 2.5 second snare plate like that. And again, I could tweak the EQ on these, you know. So my first auxiliary now on the 6 submix is sending out to this first reverb, which is a small little ambient wooden-y space. And the second auxiliary is sending out to the larger reverb. Like that. So I'll title this one Reverb 2. So I've got 2 reverbs now instead of a delay and a reverb. Right? Now on the actual Drum Machine Designer, if you go to the Sends page, these smart controls, as you remember, that these 6 control the first auxiliaries on the 6 submixes sending out to the delay, so it says group delay, and the second set here control the second auxiliary on the 6 submixes sending out to the reverb. But now instead of a delay and a reverb, we've got 2 reverbs, so we can change the titles on this panel if we want. Go to the smart controls, yeah, bring in the edit, switch to Sends, and just click on that title and it appears here. I can retitle it here Reverb Small, and click on that title and call this Reverb Large. And now that's it, that's all done. And now on my panel here, this says Reverb Small. This turns up the first auxiliary send on the 6 submixes to send to the small reverb. this turns up the second auxiliary sending to the larger reverb. Etc. Okay. So again, you know, all that customization. We've got 2 reverbs now for the 2 auxiliaries on the 6 submixes. Save my custom kit. That all gets saved with the custom kit. But you don't have to have just 2 auxiliary returns for your 6 submixes. You can have more. So let's set up a third one, and a really good one to have with every custom kit you build is a parallel compressor. Parallel compression really adds extra punch to your drums. So to set that up, we just select the 6 submixes, and then with them all highlighted like that, we choose the next empty send slot and assign it to the next available bus, which for me is bus 10. That's the next free bus with nothing in brackets after it. So I choose that, boom, and a third auxiliary send is created on each of the 6 submixes, sending out on that next free bus, bus 10, and a new auxiliary return is automatically created receiving on that bus. Okay, now if we look at the 6 submixes and the 2 current existing auxiliary returns, our 2 reverb returns, they're all going out, their output slot is all sending out to bus 1. That's the final channel for the whole drum mix, right? So this newly created auxiliary on its output slot, we've got to switch that to the same bus. Bus 1, the Drum Machine Designer main bus, right? Okay. Now, I'll solo this newly created auxiliary return. Now, on the 6 submixes here, the third auxiliary send sends out to this new stereo auxiliary return. Okay. So, let's turn all the other auxiliaries down. So if I turn up, I've got it soloed now, this auxiliary return. So if I turn up the auxiliary send 3 on the kick, I'll start to send kick from this kick submix bus into this new stereo return. As much or as little as I want. And the same for the snare. I can turn up the third auxiliary on the snare submix and send as much or as little snare and claps into this new stereo return. And the same for the hats, and the same for the toms, and the percussion and shakers, etc. Right? So basically, by turning up these sends to the amount I want, the third send, I'm sending each of those 6 submixes, kick, snare and claps, hats, toms, etc., into this new auxiliary return. So in effect, I'm creating a new submix of the 6 submixes. Okay, I just turn up the amount that I want each of those submixes to arrive in this new stereo channel, and I turn these up until I get the balance that I want in this new stereo channel. Okay. Okay. Now across the channel, I'm going to put a compressor, stereo compressor, and we're going to really compress the crap out of this stereo channel, this stereo submix of the kit, right? Okay, so now I've got a really heavy pumping heavily compressed submix of the whole kit on this stereo channel now. So I'll title this channel Comp. Now if we had this much compression across our whole kit in stereo, it's just too much compression. Right, but now let's unsolo this compressed stereo submix and turn it down. And let's listen. This is the clean mix only we're listening to now, and it will fade in the heavily compressed submix alongside the clean mix in parallel. And you just blend some of it in, and it adds extra power, but you don't lose the clarity of the clean uncompressed channels. They still go to the final stereo channel, but in parallel alongside the clean channels, this heavily compressed submix is being sent, a little bit of it is being added in, and that adds in all this extra power, but you keep the clarity of the clean channels. Yeah, and this final stereo submix, compressed submix here, once you've got the compression set up heavy, okay, you can then tweak, listen to it, solo it and listen to it, and just tweak the amount of each of the 6 submixes that's being sent into this compressed stereo submix here, because now you've got heavy compression on it. If the kick is turned up more, the compressor reacts more to the kick, right, and it changes the sound of that compressed submix. If I turn the kick down, then the compressor starts to reacting to whatever is the next loudest drum. You know what I mean? So once you've got the heavy compression across that stereo auxiliary return submix, this compressed submix, once you've got the compression on there really heavy, then just you can do further tweak to the auxiliary sends for the 6 submixes just to rebalance it and get the pumping that you want. You know, whether you want the kick to be much more or less or whatever. And then you just blend this in with the clean mix, and it adds all this extra power. Look at that, you really don't need a lot. You just bring in just a little. It's subtle, or it can be more extreme, you know, but it really works even at little amounts. It just gives it that extra power. You know what I mean? Okay, so you've got parallel compression now. Okay, and you save your custom kit. This parallel compressor will be part of that whole custom kit. Okay, but now we've got the first auxiliary on the 6 submixes sending to a small reverb. The second auxiliary send on the 6 submixes sending out to a larger second reverb. And the third auxiliary send on the 6 submixes sending out to a parallel compressor. Well, let's add in a fourth auxiliary and have a delay back. Okay, so we have 2 reverbs, a parallel compressor and a delay. We get the 6 submixes, highlight them, add another auxiliary send on the next free bus, which for me is bus 11. A fourth auxiliary is created on each of the submixes sending out on bus 11, and a new auxiliary return is created automatically receiving on that bus. Okay, on here we'll put a delay. Let's have the tape delay. I'm going to set a short little time on this, just a 16th, like that. This, because it's an auxiliary, you want all wet, no dry signal, right? And the same for the space designers on the auxiliary returns. You want the dry down completely, and you want it all reverb signal. Yeah. Oop. Yeah. Dry down completely, just reverb signal only. Right. Okay, so I've got this delay now on this auxiliary, so I'll title this delay. And now the fourth auxiliary on each of my submixes sends out to a delay now. And again, this delay auxiliary return, assign it to the final drum machine designer bus. Along with all these, they're all going to bus 1, which is the final drum machine designer stereo channel, right? Okay, so now I can turn up this fourth auxiliary on the 6 submixes and add delay. Okay, just tweak that delay time. Take the sync off. Turn the delay down. So a little slap back kind of delay now. Like that. So now I've got a delay. 2 reverbs, parallel compressor and a delay. 4 auxiliaries in total for my 6 submixes. Okay. Now there's only one last thing to do. These 2 extra auxiliaries returns we've created, which one is our parallel compressor and one is our delay, they're not inside the stack. Okay. If we highlight the stack main channel, it goes light grey and it wraps around and underneath all the channels that are in the stack above it, right? And if we follow it down, look, the last channel inside the stack above the grey line is the 2 original auxiliaries, but the two newly created auxiliaries, they're not in the stack. The grey line doesn't extend underneath them. So we've got to get these into the stack before we save our custom kit, so that next time the custom kit loads, these two new auxiliaries will be inside the stack with all the other channels. So to do that, we select the first channel inside the stack, hold down Shift and select our final channel, which is our last newly added auxiliary return. Boom. And now everything has got is highlighted, and I create a track for everything now. Right click, oh, let's do that again. Select the first channel inside the stack, hold down Shift, select the last channel, right click and create a track for everything. Boom. Now that creates a track for everything in our drum mix, including the newly created compressor auxiliary return and the newly created delay auxiliary return. And now that they've got tracks, that puts them inside the stack. So now if I select the main channel in the mixer, it becomes highlighted. You can see it wrapping around all the channels, the grey line, follow it down, and look now, our compressor and delay, they are above the grey line, they're inside the stack. Okay, that's it. Okay, so that's some customizations there. We've got parallel compression, we've got a small and a large reverb, and we've got a delay now. Okay, and if we save our custom kit, all that gets saved and loads with the custom kit every time. All right. And then finally, on the main channel for the whole kit, there's effects on here, and these can be changed as part of our customization of our kit as well. So you can put any effects you want on the final channel, right? And then of course on your Drum Machine Designer, the effects panel here, the main controls page, effects panel, these smart controls are assigned to parameters of effects and EQ across the final channel. Now we know we've got these two assigned to the high and low cut filter on the EQ. Okay, so probably best to leave those on all the time because they're useful for doing mix EQ moves, right? But these two effects in the middle, pulsar, ensemble, they're connected to the auto filter and the ensemble here on the final channel. Well, I don't want those effects, so if I remove the auto filter and remove the ensemble from this final channel, then these two smart controls connected to those two plugins, they'll disappear because I'm removing the plugins they're connected to, right? So I remove the auto filter from this final channel and the smart control connected to it disappears. Remove the ensemble, the smart control connected to it disappears. Okay, so look, you know, I'll just put a custom thing here on the final channel. I'm going to add a bass amp designer on the final drum channel, right? So I can kind of get this sound. Right, now the whole drum mix is going through this bass amp now. Put the slider all the way towards amp. Okay, and then you just bring the slider back to the middle where it's got no amp or direct box, it's right in the middle between them, and then adjust the output. You don't want it to be too loud. When this plugin is off and then on, you want the volume to be about the same with the slider here in the middle there. So adjust the output until when you turn the plugin off and on, it's about the same level. Okay, and then slide it towards amp. And then set the master so the level's right. Okay, now you just tweak it to get a sound you want. I'm going like to try and get a sound like it's going through a big old speaker box, you know. So there's my sort of ratty old PA sound, like it's going through a manky old speaker box. And then the next thing is I want some ambient space reverb, like it's in an old squat rave in an old some type of small industrial unit or something like that. So after the bass amp, I'm going to add a space designer, and the space designer I'm going to set it to a medium indoor space. Like say, there's so many to choose from. You can go through and choose them. I'll just go with this big club room. So now after, because this is an insert effect, this reverb, you do have the dry signal up. Unlike an auxiliary return reverb, right? You have the dry up and you blend in the amount of reverb you want. So now, after the bass amp, the whole kit is now going through this reverb, adding this kind of small club type room sound. And just adjust the amount of reverb. Okay, so with this reverb and this bass amp, the signal passing through both these, it sounds like it's in a sort of manky old, like the mix is going through a pair of nasty old speaker boxes in a sort of ambient space, you know. Okay, so that's my kind of effect, right, for the final mix. And there we are. And now I want to get some smart controls to control that bass amp and the delay and the reverb, right? So that I can bring in as much of that PA in a room sound as I want, right? So let's close this for a minute. Go to the smart controls. Oh, come on. Go to the smart controls. Choose the main control panel. Now, bring in the editor. And we can see we've got these two unmapped smart controls for the effect panel. So I choose that one, and I'm going to open the bass amp on the final channel there. Okay, there's the unmapped port. Select its unmapped slot here, latch learn, and I'm going to move this slider, this amp slider there. And it's learnt, bass amp design and mix. Okay, on latch learn. Now when I turn this up, it moves towards direct box. Turn it the other way, it moves towards amp. So I need to invert this smart control. Invert. Now when I turn this up, it turns up all the way to amp. But when it's down, I don't want it to be at direct box, I want it to be in the middle at 50%. So here on the max value, set it to 50%. And because it's inverted, this max value will be the minimum value, because it's inverted, right? So at the bottom of the travel, the slider's at 50% right in the middle. Right, then we turn it up, and it pushes the slider more and more towards the amp sound. Okay, right, that's that. Then we open the space designer, and with the same pot selected, add another mapping for it. Select that unmapped slot, latch learn, and just move the reverb amount. There it is, learnt, reverb output. So now when I turn this up, it turns up the bass amp, like it pushes the slider more towards amp, and it turns the reverb up here as well, the amount of reverb. But at full travel, the reverb's up way too high. So for the reverb amount here, the output, I just turn this down for the max. Let's bring it down to about -12. So that when this mix control is up full, it's put the slider all the way on the amp towards amp, so we get full amp sound. But the reverb's only up that much, in fact a little bit less, say 14 like that, or even less. Okay, so I turn this up, it turns up it slides the bass more toward the amp, more towards amp, and it brings up the reverb, right? Like that. Okay, and then finally, what would be cool is that we got the button next to this control. Select the button, and we want this to turn the two plugins off or on. So select the button, Now there shouldn't be these two unmapped slots here, there should be only one. That's a bug. Close the editor, open the editor, and you just get the one slot. So the button's selected, there's its unmapped slot. Learn, turn the reverb off, that's the bypass for the reverb mapped. Then add a second mapping, select that empty unmapped slot, learn is still on, turn the bass amp off. That's the bypass for the bass amp selected. Okay, so now this button controls the bypass for the reverb and the bass amp. But it's back to front, so it needs to, both these need to be inverted. Invert, invert. Now they're inverted. When this button is switched on, lit, both plugins come on, and when it's off, both plugins are turned off. So now I can turn off my bass amp and room sound from here and turn it on, and then turn up the amount of it. Okay, and I just need to retitle this. It's currently titled Mix, so I'll just title it Club Sound. Okay, so now I've got this controlling these two plugins, and anytime I want on my Drum Machine Designer, let's close Smart Controls, on my Drum Machine Designer I can have this off, and then I can bring in that club sound and turn up the amount of it. Like that. Okay. We've still got one empty Smart Control slot here, so I'll assign that to the compressor submix, you know, the parallel compressor submix inside the stack, so that from the front panel here I can just tweak the amount of parallel compression I'm getting on my mix. So to do that, bring in the Smart Controls again, and let's close these two. Okay, bring in the editor, select the unmapped slot, Smart Control. Okay, go down our track stack here until we find the track for the parallel compressor. There it is. There. This is connected to the parallel compressor auxiliary return in the mixer. Right. This is the track for it. So unmap pot, latch learn, move the slider for the volume. That's learnt. The compressor channel volume. Okay. I'll just title it Parallel Comp. And then the button, let's have that turn that compressor channel off completely. So select the button, latch learn, and mute the compressor track, which will mute its channel. That's learnt, compressor mute, and it just needs to be inverted. So now when this is on, the compressor submix, you know, the parallel compressor channel is and track is active, and when it's off, it's muted, and then this turns up the amount of that parallel compression, and that's it. So if we look at the mix now, there's the parallel compressor channel there, and this control on the front of my Drum Machine Designer controls the amount, and this switches it off or on. So I can have my parallel compression off. Let's turn my club sound off. Right, I can switch on my parallel compression and bring it up as much as I want. Yeah, there you go. So there's some more customization. Yeah, I've added some custom effects on the final channel to get this club sound effect. I've added a smart control to control my parallel compressor auxiliary return, and again, all this stuff gets saved when we save our custom kit. Right, so we're ready to save the kit now. We've done all these customizations, and all these customizations, they're part of the custom kit as well as the custom sounds. Yeah. So we finished our customizations, including adding any sounds that we want to the kit and customizing the stack, and then we just compact this down to the main track, bottom of the library, click save, and just save it. I've got after party compa, I'll call it, because it's got the parallel compression. I'll call it after party compa club sound. So I know it's got the parallel compression and the club sound. Boom, saved. And there it is, my user patch location there. Look, come on, Logic, can I have the use of the mouse? Thank you there. After party compa club sound. Okay, so let's just load up a regular Drum Machine Designer, the regular after party. Go back and load up our user one we just made, after party compa club sound. There it is, it's all loaded up. Yeah, it's all, everything's there. Sends to our small reverb, big reverb, club sound, parallel compression, etc. And in our stack it all loads properly. So there's our 6 submixes. We've got the compression and custom EQs on the kick, snare, and on the hats we've got the flanger and the custom EQ. These 3 submixes we took the compressor and EQ off because we didn't need them. That loads up correctly. We've got the 2 reverbs here, we've got our power compressor, and we've got our delay. Okay, and it's all there. So there you go, that's the last thing really, customising the stack to go with your custom kit, and it all becomes part of the kit. The stack is very much a part of your custom kit, and especially that parallel compressor is a really good thing to build into all your custom kits. Yeah, so that's how you do that. That's the end of the Drum Machine Designer tutorials. I hope that was useful, and I'll see you for the next one, whatever it is.